Hello and welcome to another booktube video from me, Lauren, from Lauren and the Books. I'm just like Mrs. Claus today. It's because I've got my Christmas light lantern parade turn on thing that I'm going to shortly after this. So that's why I'm dressed like Mrs. Claus. But hey, she can bring the Christmas early, can't she? I know it's December, well, tomorrow when you're watching this, and there'll be more Christmas jumpers to be seen. But anyway, we're here today talking about the books that I read in the month of November. I read 10 books in November, which is great. One of those books was 816 pages long. And that, I think, is why I read little less this month. Also, I read Little Women, which is like 600 pages, isn't it? 630. So I read 2 very long books this month. Not that I'm making excuses for why I read more, but normally I sort of read sort of 13 to 15 range. But yeah, next year the plan is to read less anyway, so we're slowly getting there. So I'll be talking today about the 10 books that I read in November, plus 2 books that I'm currently reading. We'll start with the first book that I read in November, and that was The Subtle Knife. Was it The Subtle Knife? Was it The Subtle Knife? Yes, it was The Subtle Knife. I listened to the audiobook of The Subtle Knife, which is the second in the His Dark Materials series, trilogy. The newest, so Philip Pullman wrote a book, 3 books in the sort of 90s and noughties, called His Dark Materials. I mean, I'm sure you're all familiar with these books. The first one's called Northern Lights, the next one's called A Subtle Knife, and the last one's called The Amber Spyglass. And then more recently, he has written another trilogy that runs sort of before, during, and after this period of time, called The Book of Dust. And the first one's set before this, the second one is set after, and then the third one I think is also set after, and the third one has just come out. It's called The Secret Commonwealth. I liked, well, anyway, we'll get on to the main thing is that I'm re-listening to all of the His Dark Materials and the Book of Dust books ahead of listening to The Secret Commonwealth. So this was where I got to in the series. Now, The Subtle Knife is probably my fave. It's probably my fave out of all 3 of them. I mean, they're amazing, but I really I remember, and there's going to be spoilers in here, but I remember reading The Subtle Knife for the first time when I was on holiday with my parents, and the introduction of sort of like the modern world in this book compared to where we've been set in sort of Lyra's Oxford in the first book. Lyra is the main character in these books. Really shocked me and thrilled me because I wasn't expecting it at all. There's a lot of Lee Scoresby in here, who is my favourite character, and yeah, this is a great listen for me and a great reread for me. I always listen to the cast recording, which is read by Philip himself and then has various actors play in their different parts of the people in there. And what is thrilling to me also is that the actor who plays Jennifer in The Archers is Mrs. Coulter in these books as well. So that's all very thrilling. So yeah, if you haven't read these books, then do, because they're amazing adventure stories with like deeper meanings and great characters and great plot and a great sort of magical world around it. But the audiobooks for me are particularly special because they're just so well done. This cast recording is so well done. So yeah, that was the first book I read. And then I read One of Us by Elizabeth Day, which is a new fiction book out by Elizabeth Day. And it's sort of like a political family saga thriller, I think could be the 3 buzzwords I'd use for this. And I really enjoyed it. I was really, really sort of enveloped in what was going on, because I love sort of like page-turnery family sagas anyway, and the fact that this had a sort of like political edge and a sort of thrillery edge I really flew through it. There was some great sort of like topical subject matter in here as well. There's like a climate emergency, politics and corruption and things like that. But yeah, I thought it was really well read. It's really well written. It's the first fiction book I've read by Elizabeth Day. Elizabeth Day, I believe, began as a fiction writer and then has had a super successful podcast, the How to Fail podcast, and has written some non-fiction books off the back of that, of which I've read quite a few of them. But this was my first fiction book, and yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. So would recommend getting your mitts on that. I imagine that might make it to the Women's Prize for Fiction long list. Next up was The Story of the Heart. Speaking of Women's Prize, this was the winner of the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction last year, and I was so impressed with the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction long list last year. I read so many great books on there and hadn't got round to this, and this was the one that won. And I kept putting it off, I think because I was nervous about it. The subject matter is very, very sensitive, and like I just knew it was going to upset me deeply. It is the story of a heart. The book is called The Story of a Heart, and it is about a heart transplant, a heart donation from a little girl who dies in a car accident, and her giving her heart to a young boy who has a heart condition and needs one. And it follows the whole journey of this. We learn about both of these young people and their lives before the heart transplant, and their families' lives after, and in the case of the young lad that we're reading about, his life after. And we're hearing about all the staff that are involved in their journey and what that journey looked like and their care. And yeah, it really was sad. It really, really was sad, but it was so amazingly written, so well written and so well researched, with these sort of pepperings of medical history throughout this book as we're learning about this which feels very sort of like happening right now, storyline of this heart being donated from one child to another. And yeah, every time it felt like it was going to get a bit too overwhelming, you had a sort of a breather from it. It's just so incredibly well crafted. Like, I can absolutely see why this won. And I sort of feel pleased that I'd given myself the space to enjoy it as, it sounds like a mad thing to say, but like enjoy it at a later date, because I think maybe if I had read it straight away, I would have been a bit frightened of it. But I bought it when it came out in paperback and sort of had it here and kept thinking, I will get around to reading it, I will get around to reading it. And I'm so pleased I did. But yeah, absolutely fantastically sculpted book, fantastically written, and yeah, amazing and informative. And having worked in the NHS for 19 years, I always enjoy reading about the hospital setting and the care setting, and yeah, the work that a lot of these doctors, nurses, admin peeps, charity workers, all sorts have done in this book, and how that's celebrated is just a marvellous thing. So yeah, really, really lovely, really, really lovely. Would highly recommend. But yeah, go in and be prepared to get yourself a bit upset. Speaking of upset, I feel like I got upset in a lot of books this month, because I also listened to When Gavin Met Stacey and Everything in Between, which is a sort of companion book to the Gavin and Stacey series, which is written by James Corden and Ruth Jones. And this book is also written by them, and I listened to the audiobook of this, and it is narrated by them. But just for me to say, oh, it's narrated by them, it truly feels like a conversation that they are just, it feels like a really wonderful long podcast that they're having this chat about the beginnings of Gavin and Stacey, how those two met. They were both actors in a series called Fat Friends, and the origins of Gavin and Stacey and where the ideas came from, and the casting and the background, and when they'd fallen out and when they got back friends again. And yeah, you really get everything. It's quite a short audiobook, it's about 6 hours long, and I listened to it very, very quickly. But if you are a fan of something, in the same way that I am a massive fan of Gavin and Stacey, as is David, my husband, he'd listened to this as well and also had a lovely time. Like, this is just catnip for us. I had a similar thing a couple of years ago when I read the companion book to called The Midwife, which was a British TV series that I also love, not a comedy like Gavin and Stacey. But yeah, I had the book of that and I read that and had a lovely time. So I just think this is just a great opener for, like, if you're into something, then do seek out those non-fiction books and companion books that go along with it, because I think you'll just have a lovely time. And this had sort of like bonus stuff as well, and it also had the audio, which I loved, and I'm sure the actual physical book is just as good, but the audio had like the scenes, so you could actually hear parts of Gavin and Stacey being played, the bits that they'd been talking about. So yeah, it was wonderful, so wonderful to hear all about like how Gavin and Stacey came together and everything. And I do think this is something I'm going to revisit, because I just had such a lovely comforting time listening to it. And David and I are actually rewatching Gavin and Stacey at the moment. But it also like tells the story of James and Ruth's friendship, and they are just so sort of platonically in love with each other, which is so wonderful to hear. And when they're talking at each other or to each other during this big conversation audiobook, and often like they're sort of in awe of each other and their skills in terms of the writing and acting and particular scenes they've done and stuff like that, they're just crying the whole time because they're so proud of each other and so thrilled to have done this amazing piece of work together, this Gavin and Stacey, and they're working on something now which I imagine will be completely different, but I'm sure will still be great. I mean, I hope it's great. But yeah, it was really lovely for them to talk about their friendship and to hear that playing out sort of in real time. It was also very honest because it documents times of which they lost contact and then come back together and stuff like that. And yeah, just very sort of honest. It must have been quite cathartic, I imagine, going through sort of like, oh, why didn't we talk at that time and why did this happen, and etc, etc. But yeah, I really, really loved it. It was a 5-star, absolutely brilliant. And David also very much enjoyed it. So there we go. Very, very pleased. And then, after I listened to that, I read the big massive book I was talking about, the 816-page Never by Ken Follett. I've joined a book club at my local library, it's a WI book club, and we sort of take it in turns to sort of pick books, and people put forward like a couple of books, and it's whatever the librarian can get hold of 17 copies of, because there's 17 of us. And the lady who put this forward is very, very keen on Ken Follett. I'd never read a Ken Follett before, and when I've spoken to other people about this, like who are readers, a few people have said the same, but quite often people have said to me, oh, when they find out I'm a reader, they say, have you ever read any Ken Follett, particularly the Pillars of the Earth series? He's such an incredible writer, and I'd never read anything. So then when this opportunity came up, I was like, oh great, I'm finally getting a chance to read a Ken Follett book. Me and Ken Follett, we just didn't get on in this instance. I'm not saying I'm never going to go back to him, but it was, the book for me felt like a really big slog. It was 816 pages and I felt every one of those pages. Interestingly, I gave it 4 out of 10. Everybody else in the book club, apart from one other woman who gave it 5 out of 10, they all gave it 9 or 10. Everyone loved it. So according to that little pool of people, I'm very much in the minority. But for me, it was just sort of relentless hard work getting through this story about nuclear war and the threat of nuclear war, and the women in the book were just sort of written hilariously to me, so daft. There's a section where there's and I just didn't believe the dialogue between people as well. So I've got 2 examples of one character in particular. So one character in particular, she has fallen in love with somebody at work, and they're both working sort of undercover, and it's got to stay a secret that they've started a relationship together. And the way they talk to each other is just, and she's like in her early 30s, and they're at a wedding and they're having sort of snatch conversation, and she's saying things like, my God, I wish we were making love right now. I'm like, no one says, my God, I wish we were making love right now. And then there's another section where their relationship is now out in the open, and she is meeting his mother, and his mother's very into expensive jewellery. And quite often Ken Follett will go into sort of like detail about what characters are wearing, and when he's describing what the women are wearing, I'm like, no one is wearing that, Ken. And in this instance, she's wearing a sort of very fitted office wear dress because she wants to look very formal and professional in front of his parents, and it's got sort of like flashes of blue in it, and she's agonising over what jewellery to wear because she knows she doesn't own any expensive jewellery that will impress his mother. So she then opts for, with this sort of office wear fitted dress, to wear an arrow head that she found in the desert on a leather thong, that necklace that hangs down. And I'm just like, no, Ken, you could have checked with any woman, and any woman would have told you that no one's wearing that necklace with that dress. So yeah, and there was a little bit, to me, it felt like they'd sort of elbowed in a few sort of minorities and stuff like that to sort of tick a few boxes. But yeah, I didn't love it, as you can gather, but I was in the minority. So yeah, people were really taken by how much they felt that threat of nuclear war. But for me, it just didn't work for me. So there we go, 816 pages. She got through it. Next up is one I can't really talk about the plot of because it's the 3rd in the series of the Her Majesty's Royal Coven series by Juno Dawson. The last book is called The Last Rites. Is it called The Last Rites? Human Rights, sorry. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. What I will say, oh God, I can't really say anything. So I'll tell you about the series. So the series is about a group of witches living in Hebden Bridge, modern witches, and these women are childhood friends, and they are in their sort of 30s. Well, I take it to be they're sort of my age, because Juno is my age, and a lot of the references sort of reference like Spice Girls and stuff like that, stuff that I like. Yeah, so, and you learn, you meet them in the first book, which is called Her Majesty's Royal Coven, and then sort of explosive things happen at the end of that book. My God, explosive things happen at the end of that book. And then you have the second book, which is called The Shadow Cabinet, and that's sort of like picking up the pieces from what had happened there. Then we took a little break and had the Anne Boleyn sort of novella that's talking about the beginnings of the coven. I didn't like that one at all. And then the last one is sort of like overriding, harking back to stuff that happened in the first book, which is why I can't talk about it. And picking up the pieces from what happened in the second and indeed the first book. And I feel like it was all tied together very, very well. I feel like a lot of characters got their ending or got their comeuppance in some places. But yeah, it's a very, very enjoyable series, and I do think I will go back, I will revisit this series at some point. When I've listened to the books, when the new books have come out, I've always re-listened to them, and as I've re-listened to them, I've enjoyed them more and more. So the books are narrated by Nicola Coughlan from Derry Girls and Bridgerton. And yeah, she does an amazing job of all the accents and everything like that. And I really, really liked it. And this was sort of, there's a lot of sort of hold your breath moments in this particular book, and the plot is just fantastic. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. And I thought as the end to a series, it was great. So well done, Juno, and well done me for reading it. Next up, I read Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. Oh, stop it at this beautiful little edition. I actually felt like I was in Little Women a few times reading this, because, oh, I've got to make sure, because I've got a receipt in here for work that I've got to take, so don't let me put this away. I'll put it out there now so I don't forget it. Because it's so little, I felt like I was like Joe, just sitting on the window reading this or something like that. Except I'm not Joe, I'm Amy out of them. But yeah, this was a reread for me, maybe like my 4th or 5th reread, and I had such a lovely time. This has got like enough elements of Christmas that you can read it, and it be sort of like, it was making me feel Christmassy, even though it's not a Christmas book. There's a couple of like Christmas scenes, big events happen at Christmas, but you're also hearing about the summer and all sorts of other things. But yeah, you're hearing about 4 sisters. I mean, you all know what happens. You're hearing about 4 sisters growing up in America and their lives, and they've all got sort of different personalities. And yeah, I really, really loved it. Like, I love it every time, but I really, really loved it. My favourite film of all time is the Greta Gerwig 2019 film of Little Women. So once I'd finished this, I watched the 90s film, which has got Winona Ryder and Claire Danes and Kirsten Dunst. I will say that film does something that I do not like when it happens, and that's they recast one of the members of the sisters. They recast Amy, who was played by young Kirsten Dunst, as a young girl, and then they recast her in the later scenes when she's older. And I don't like it when they just recast one person, because I feel like it's really jarring, because everyone else looks the same, but then Amy doesn't. But yeah, Amy is played by Florence Pugh in the 2019 film, and I feel like Amy gets a real redemption there, like justice for Amy in that film. Like, they make her more relatable. I think she, in the book and in that first film, she just feels like a little spoiled brat. But yeah, I really love Amy in that film. So there we go. This is great. Please read. I must read more of the books. I must read. There's Jo's Boys and Little Men as well, I think. I don't think they'll be in here. No, they're just books from the other Macmillan's Collector's Library, which is these. But yeah, I mean, this was written in 1880. Like, that is insane to me that this still feels so relevant and great. Like, it's like 150 years old. Well done, Louisa May Alcott, well done. But yes, had a lovely, lovely time with that. Then, on that same day that I watched both of the Little Women films, I also treated myself to reading a new book that has come into my possession. This is The Hidden Life of Trees, a graphic adaptation. And this is based on a book written by Peter Walburn and translated and illustrated by Frank Bernard and Benjamin Flow. And my lovely friend Philippa bought this for me as a thank you. Every year I'm on her Christmassy podcast, which will be coming out on the 1st of December, called Quick Book Reviews. Please do search in whatever podcast app you listen to, Quick Book Reviews, and she makes an amazing book podcast all through the year where she gives, you guessed it, quick book reviews, but also interviews with authors, and it's just brilliant. And every year for, God, a long time, we've recorded a Christmas episode where we talk about what books we're planning on reading over Christmas, and she always buys me a selection of books to say thank you for being on that podcast, which is always lovely. And this year they arrived on the day that I had recorded the podcast, so I unwrapped them, and I'd actually heard her talk about this book on the podcast, so I was very excited. And this is a non-fiction book about trees, based on this massive book that Peter Wallaburn had written, and it is so beautifully illustrated and set in 2 seasons, which you know I love, and just gives so much interesting information about trees and forests and their communication with each other and their resilience and how they've adapted over the years, and it was just fantastic. I loved reading it in one sort of sitting. I was sat on the sofa all day just having a lovely hibernation day, I was calling it, and just read this, and it really reminded me of when I was younger and I used to get very into sort of getting non-fiction books out from the library and just like reading a whole book about space or about Egypt or about the Romans or something like that, and it just felt so immersive and lovely, and I just had such an amazing time reading it. And it was also something about the font really reminded me of like those books when I was younger. But yeah, I had a great time with this. This would be a great gift, guys. I received it as a gift and would recommend this as a gift. It was a great gift. So yeah, loved that, gave that 5 stars. Amazing. Then I read the 3rd book in the Slow Horses series. You'll know that I'm working my way through the Slow Horses books written by Mick Herron. They've also been made into a TV series, which I have watched 4 of the series, and now I'm going through and reading the book and then watching the series sort of alongside it. That's probably done for this year now, and I'll probably pick that up again in January because I'm on to the 4th book, which is called Spook Street. It's actually waiting at the library for me to collect. But yeah, this is just a great series. I mean, the TV series is fantastic. It's got Gary Oldman in it playing Jackson Lamb, Jack Lowden, and a whole host of other great, amazing actors. And this particular series I remember really enjoying when I watched it, and then when I was reading the book version of it, which is called Dead Lions, yeah, I really enjoy it. I've become sort of insufferable, I've mentioned this a few times, but when I'm watching it with David, I'm like, oh, it's a little bit different in the book actually. Oh, they've changed that from the book. No, that is exactly how it is in the book, and I'm quite enjoying it. I'm quite enjoying sort of the immersion of reading something and then watching it and sort of like comparing a little bit. So yeah, and it's interesting to see the sort of creative decisions they've made with like maybe replacing one character with another on a certain storyline, or yeah, it's just, yeah, I'm finding it very interesting. So yeah, we'll definitely continue with the series into the new year. There's only 5 series out at the moment. I assume there'll be a 6th series out at some point in 2027, 2026, that's next year, maybe 2027. And yeah, I'll continue to do this where I'm sort of reading and watching along and having a lovely time with it. So yes, we'll continue with that. And then the last book I actually finished this month, before I talk about the 2 books that I'm reading, is A Long Winter by Colm Toibin. I've taken it back to the library. This is a novella which came from a series of short stories that were published in the early noughties, and it is about a family whose mother is an alcoholic, and after an argument with her husband about where he has hidden the alcohol that she is drinking, she disappears into a snowstorm. Now she's never recovered. They don't know where she's gone, and they're waiting for it to become spring so they can work out if her body indeed is somewhere, and they'll know that from where the vultures are hanging around. And it's about, very quickly, about the sort of lead up to that, and this is all told in like 120 pages, so amazingly done. What's happening on the run up to that, when that actually happens, and then the majority of it is about the young lad and his father dealing with that, and the weight of what that feels like, having had an argument with somebody and then them disappearing and then them potentially never coming back, and also the actual physical weight of waiting to find out if his mother's body will be recovered in the spring, in a pretty horrific way of vultures and other animals preying on her. So yeah, not very Christmassy. I saw it and thought, oh yeah, oh lovely, winter, yeah, we'll take that. But yeah, it's definitely snowy, but I wouldn't say it's hugely wintry, but amazingly written. I must read more Colm Toibin. I think I've only read Brooklyn, which I really enjoyed, and I've got Long Island, which is the sequel to Brooklyn. So yeah, I must read more of that. And I'm going to talk about 2 books here. I'm not going to talk too much about, well, we'll start with this one. This is Blackwood's Blue Sky, and we're discussing this for Patreon Book Club tonight, and I keep my thoughts for Patreon Book Club. But just to say, yeah, I'm almost done with this. I've got about 50 pages of it left. This is a reimagining of Beauty and the Beast, which I didn't realise when I read the first 50 pages, and then when I picked it up I saw that it said a daring reimagining of Beauty and the Beast, and I thought, oh okay, and that made me think about things a lot more. So it's magical realism set in Alaska, about a woman and her child who, the woman's not happy with the life she's providing for her child. She works in a bar, she's leaving her child on her own a lot so that she can complete shifts, and then often will stay on at the bar to have a drink, and she's not just being the mother that she wants to be. And an opportunity arises where her and her daughter can move into the sort of woods, deep into the woods, and live there with a man. And I've said it's a reimagining of Beauty and the Beast, so you can imagine what is then happening there. And yeah, there's a real sense of place about this, and I very much enjoyed like reading about Alaska, and like I could really imagine this bar that she was working in and this cabin that they've moved to and stuff like that. I really did feel like I was there with all of that. But yeah, I won't talk much more about it, but I will also just say that the book was written by Eowyn Ivey, who wrote The Snow Child, which came out a good few years ago, and I remember reading that and really enjoying that as well. So there we go. Yeah, 50 pages. We'll see. And then the last book that will probably be done by the time I talk about my December books is the Mary Earp's autobiography. Mary Earp is retired now. I think it's called All In. Let's have a look. I've got it out from Borrow Box at the moment. Yeah, it's called All In. And it is her autobiography. She is retired now, but was the England goalkeeper for the Lionesses. And this is about her journey to become a goalkeeper, and then we're going to find out a bit more about her England career, which is what the bit that I'm at the moment. So I've got like 3 hours left. I imagine I'll get it done today or tomorrow. And yes, it's been an interesting read for me because I've never been much of a follower of football. David sort of is, and I've watched football with him before. I feel much more interested in the women's football. Obviously, it's me. And I was aware of Mary Earp, but this sort of come up on my library app, and I thought, yeah, I will listen to that. It's only 7 hours, I'll give it a listen. And what has sort of floored me is I find Mary so hard to relate to, in that I've never been a sporty person, I've never been a competitive person, and I've never been a sort of performance driven person. And I imagine if you're an athlete, then you are performance driven. And her sort of get up and go, and I imagine as a goalkeeper as well, you've only really got yourself that you can be in competition with, because, well, I guess there's like, I think from what I'm gathering, there's sort of like 3 or 4 goalkeepers employed by a club, and they sort of swap them in and out. If one's injured, they bring one in and whatever. But like how competitive she is with herself, and the high standard she holds herself to in terms of her performance, I just cannot relate to any of that. It's so hard to read it and be like, I just can't imagine what this must feel like every day. And the way she sort of beats herself up about stuff. She doesn't get into England, the England club, like the England team, the first 2 times she tries for it and doesn't get to go away to the England camp. It's when they're being managed by Phil Neville. When they start being managed by, and I always forget her name, but her first name's Serena, the manager who is currently the England women's manager, she does finally get her chance. And yeah, just the high standard she holds herself to, and indeed other people as well, it's very hard to relate to. I will also say it really has, and this has happened in, I think, in the 90s. Do you remember in the 90s, people in the UK, footballers were sort of pisshead lagerlouts, and I always just got the vibe that they sort of just stumbled upon football and that they just made a career out of it. So particularly people like Gaza and stuff like that. But I think knowing now, my colleague in my previous job, her daughter is a goalkeeper, and has amazingly worked her way up and is now playing for sort of under youth teams, like big youth teams like Chelsea and stuff like that. And the work that goes into getting her where she needs to be, however many times a week, as well as being a child and going to school and things like that, and then reading about that for Mary as well, and the stuff that she had to sort of overcome, and like move in different schools because one school wouldn't accommodate her football and stuff like that. It just blows my mind how much effort goes into making somebody a footballer, and how big that village is in order for that to happen. And then one little thing can happen, an injury can happen, or someone is slightly better than you, and then that just won't happen for you. There's also a great bit in there about Mary knowing that she will probably be retired by the time she's 30, and in which case she knows she has to get a mortgage early in order to get her a house. And she's like getting herself a mortgage at like 23. I was just like, that was just not in my plan. She's just a hugely sort of grown up, like able woman, just really getting shit done, really getting shit done. So there's a whole host of things that are to come, I know. David has sort of explained to me there's this thing with this other player called Hannah Hampton. This has been widely reported in the press, that Mary basically left because of this other player. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. But knowing what I know about Mary already and the high standard she holds herself to, I can completely see what is about to happen, just having read the book about Mary so far. So yeah, it's interesting reading a book about something, I guess like when you read non-fiction, often you won't know anything about it, and I don't know anything really about football, and it has been eye-opening to me and interesting, but the main takeaway is that, my God, I'm so glad I'm not like an athlete or know people who are athletes, because I just don't think our personality types mix at all. But there we go. So there we go. Those are the 10 books I read in the month of November, plus 2 that I am reading that will be done before December. Very exciting time, because we're about to get into Christmas books, aren't we? So on Wednesday, there will be a video of me talking about the books that I'm reading in the month of December. They will all be Christmas books. And yeah, hopefully you'll be able to share with me some of the books that you are planning on reading in December as well. There we go. That's it for me. I better go and get myself hyped up for the Christmas lantern parade, and hopefully it will stop raining by then. And I'll see you all again soon for another booktube video. Goodbye. Goodbye.